Yemi walked along the crowded streets of Lagos, the incessant roar of traffic accompanying him as a constant reminder of the urban frenzy. The air was heavy, the heat oppressive, and the acrid smells of smog mixed with exhaust fumes seemed to envelop him, creating a curtain of suffocation. Each step brought with it an increasingly unbearable sense of guilt. The neon lights of the billboards illuminated a city racing towards a future that seemed unconcerned about its consequences. Lagos, vibrant and pulsating, no longer seemed like the place Yemi had loved. Now all she saw was a massive mechanism of destruction, a cycle of endless consumerism that was suffocating the earth itself. Don't miss out on more stories like this. Subscribe to the channel and join us on the journey to greater consciousness. As a civil servant, Yemi was tasked with monitoring the activities of oil companies, a position that was supposed to protect him from widespread corruption. But what was once a prestigious position had long since turned into a silent fight against a system steeped in greed. Oil companies polluted, devastated land and water, and yet continued to thrive thanks to bribes and promises of favors. Every day, Yemi watched corporate executives walk past him in his office with smug smiles, while falsified documents went unnoticed, or worse, deliberately ignored by his superiors. If you have ever seen or experienced such injustice, share your experience in the comments. One day, amid the daily reports that filled his desk, Yemi found a discrepancy in the data from a major oil company. The records he saw showed a reduction in emissions, but on the ground the situation was very different. Rivers were contaminated, the land barren from hydrocarbon discharges. The lives of people in villages near the extraction areas were destroyed, yet the report presented data that seemed perfectly legal. Something inside him snapped. But the truth was not so easy to face. Yemi had known Tunda, one of the executives of that company, since their college days. They had once been friends, fellow students, and hopes for a better future. But while Yemi had tried to stick to his principles, Tunda had chosen the easy way out, accepting bribes, turning a blind eye to abuse, and living in luxury. And now, every time they came face to face during a review, Yemi felt the weight of their shared past, the betrayal of a friendship that had sacrificed its values. That evening, his mind clouded by frustration, Yemi sat on a bench in the park near his home. The distant sound of children's laughter could not dispel the whirlwind of thoughts that tormented him. How did we get to this point? He wondered. The people around him seemed oblivious to the drama that was unfolding behind the scenes of modern life. They continued to live their lives, immersed in their phones and daily worries, while the world around them was slowly being poisoned. An old man sitting next to him, with a weathered face and a calm look, interrupted his train of thought. "You are thinking too much, young man," he said with a serene smile. Yemi looked at him, surprised. "Think too much? How could I not? The world is falling apart and no one seems to care." The man nodded. "Yes, that is true. But what good is all this anger to you? Anger will not stop the world. The mind must be like a lake, calm and clear, to truly see things as they are. Find your inner peace to act with clarity. Practice daily reflection." Those words insinuated themselves into Yemi like a seed. He returned home that night feeling uneasy, but also with a new awareness. He realized that his conflict was not only with the system, but also within himself. He had spent years fighting against a corrupt world, but perhaps it was time to stop and look inside himself, to find peace before acting. Over the next few days, Yemi decided to delve deeper. She visited a community in the Niger Delta, where signs of pollution were everywhere. Children played on contaminated land, fish in the rivers were dead, and families were struggling to survive. She spoke to an elderly woman who had lost everything: her home, her land, and her hope. The woman's story echoed in Yemi's mind. The words of the man in the park mingled with the brutal reality she saw before her. How could she remain silent, knowing what she knew? But his investigations began to arouse suspicion. One day, he received an anonymous phone call warning him to be careful. His superiors, involved in illicit deals with oil companies, were watching him. Fear began to creep inside him. Corruption was more entrenched than he had imagined. In a moment of clarity, he understood that his time in Lagos was over. If he really wanted to do something, he had to disappear. Justice has a price. Have you ever heard of stories of corruption? Tell us in the comments. He fled the city that night, taking refuge in a village far from the hustle and bustle and corruption. But even in his forced quiet, Yemi couldn't forget his mission. As he hid, he began to think about a new strategy. He knew he couldn't fight the system alone, but maybe he could find allies. And then the unexpected happened. One day, he received a visit from Tunda. The old friend had realized that the path he had chosen was destroying him from the inside. Tunda was also tired of pretending, of living a life based on lies. The two sat down together and an unlikely alliance was born. Tunda, with his position within the company, had crucial information that could expose the corruption. Together, they decided to act. Yemi returned to Lagos with a new awareness, no longer alone, but with the inner calm that allowed him to see clearly. He was no longer moved by anger, but by a sense of justice that came from quiet. It is the inner calm that allows you to act with justice. Find your balance before changing the world. With the help of Tunda, he managed to expose the scandal involving corrupt oil companies and officials, risking his life for the truth. Lagos was still a chaotic, frenetic city. But for Yemi, something had changed. She had found her balance, and she knew that even if the world could not be changed in a day, every small action counted. And so, as the sun set behind the skyscrapers, Yemi looked at the city with new eyes, knowing that, step by step, she was making a difference. Your action matters. Sign up now and continue to discover stories that can inspire change.